I'm Tony Rovira, and I'm the Managing Director of Azure Minerals Limited, an ASX-listed company. We're focused on exploring and developing our nickel and copper sulfide deposits that we've identified in the northwest part of Western Australia.
Tony, thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you. Looking at the share price for Azure Minerals, you had a fantastic price run up when you had the discovery at Andover, and you pivoted from Mexico to Australia, but the share price has come off since then. Could you just talk about your kind of share price performance, just very briefly, before we get into the technical aspect of the interview?
Yes, certainly. I think that when we initially announced the discovery of the Andover nickel mineralisation, it was at a time when the nickel market was running really hot, and there was a very large degree of super excitement, probably over exuberance, if you like, and that certainly sent our share price way up. But as you said, it has come back down now, and it's probably overshot on the downside, and somewhere in between the highs and the lows is where we should be at the moment. But we did hit $1, and we went back down to below 20 cents. We're up at about 30 cents share price today, so it gives us a market cap at the moment of about 90 to 100 million Australian dollars.
Thank you. That's a good frame of reference. And the market is quite tough at the moment. I've always felt that the only thing that can really cut through a downturn in the market, or kind of a bear market, it's funny to be talking about a bear market when the long-term fundamentals or the demand side for metals like nickel or copper is so strong. But we are in a bit of a bear market, and the only thing that can really cut through that is an exploration story. What's your heritage as an exploration company, please?
Okay, well, if I go back just probably one step before this company was founded, I've been working as an exploration and mining geologist for over 40 years now. And in that time, I've had quite a few successes, and I've discovered, either personally or led teams that have discovered gold and nickel deposits which have become operating mines. So I've got quite a good success rate behind me. And probably the most famous of those was in 1997, when myself and another geologist were the two geologists who discovered the Cosmos nickel deposits in near Leinster in Western Australia, and the open pit part of the Cosmos deposit was at one stage the highest grade open pit nickel mine in the world, and then there was other deposits we discovered next door and underneath, and it operated for probably about 15 years. Was bought out by Xstrata, then became Glencore, who have recently sold it, and it's now it was on care and maintenance for a while, and it's back into operations again. So to have something like the Cosmos nickel deposits on my resume is a real kudos, because this is a 40-year mine life that project's having. So when I left Jubilee Mines, who had the Cosmos project, and we set this company up, we actually tried something different. We went to Mexico, and we were looking for epithermal style gold and silver, and also porphyry copper mineralization. We had some good success there, but in terms of making new discoveries, but we were never quite big enough or good enough just to get it over that hump into the development and production stage. And then we discovered a very nice high-grade massive sulfide zinc lead silver deposit that was outcropping at surface. And in 2019, we went into small-scale production and processing at a nearby processing facility. Unfortunately, at that time, the zinc price absolutely crashed, and came straight after the turn of the year. It was early 2020, and COVID came along, and we decided that we'd better put everything on care and maintenance for a while so we could see what happened. As it turns out, it was about the right time for us to exit Mexico. So we had everything on care and maintenance. We kept a small team in place of local technical and administrative people. We pivoted back to Australia, and we were looking for assets back here. We ended up doing a deal with one of Australia's best known successful prospectors, Mark Creasy. And he had the Andover nickel project. He'd had it in his portfolio for about 20 years and had done very little work on it. So 2 years ago, we closed the deal with him. We bought our 60% outright. It wasn't an earn-in joint venture. So we bought the 60% for shares in our company, which gave him a shareholding of about 16% of us. And we started exploration, and we've been drilling continuously for the last 2 years. And in fact, we hit the nickel sulfide mineralisation at the Andover deposit with the very first hole we drilled. So you can say that's another discovery, and there's several others that we've made on the Andover project as well.
What work? You said very little work had been done by the Creasy group. What work?
He'd owned it for about 20 years, and in that time, it was about every 4 years he'd go and do a little program. He'd flew an airborne EM survey, a VTEM survey, and magnetics as well. And then a few years later, he went and did his team went and did some surface mapping and sampling and identified some low-grade outcropping nickel mineralization. Then they did some more detailed geophysics and had a target to drill. And they drilled 7 holes in 2018, and 2 of the holes hit some pretty interesting nickel grades near surface. But at the same time as he intersected that nickel mineralization, he had a much larger success elsewhere on one of his other projects in the Fraser Range area near Nova Bollinger mine.
Yeah.
He decided that he didn't have enough funding to do both projects, so he focused on this other one, and Andover was put on the shelf. And so when I came looking for projects, he knew obviously my background as in successful nickel exploration, and so he offered this project into the company. We did the deal. We went out there, and funnily enough, we went to the very first area where he had drilled. He'd put 2 holes into a target, and he had hit a couple of meters of sort of 1% nickel. And we did a detailed surface fixed loop EM survey over that particular target. We got a really good anomaly. We pivoted the drill rigs 90 degrees from the direction he drilled, and we hit the Andover deposit with the first hole. And we've been drilling.
So I just want to go back. So you had their geophysics, you had some geochemistry, you had a couple of drill holes, and you went back and just talk me through that fixed loop detailed EM survey you did. What line spacing were you doing, and kind of why that? Well,
we did the survey, the EM survey in that location for 2 reasons. There was a very attractive VTEM conductor that was strong, indicating near surface mineralization. When we went onto the ground into the area where he drilled his first 2 holes, there's a very large gossan sticking out of the ground, and it's probably of the order of several hundred meters long, maybe 200 meters long by 20 meters wide. And when we took the samples and assayed them, that was highly anomalous in both nickel and copper. We're talking 1 to 2% nickel in the gossan and up to 3% copper. And you could see the visible copper oxide and copper carbonate mineralization there, the malachite and azurite. And so we had the VTEM conductor, we had the outcropping gossans. We then went and did the fixed loop survey over the top of it, 50 meter space lines. Over there, we got a very strong conductor starting at about 50 or 60 meters below surface. And as I said, his direction was basically drilling due east, and we turned around and we would drill due south. And we get the mineralization.
What direction does the gossan run?
The gossan runs in a sort of a northwest to southeast direction. So he just basically skimmed the edge of the mineralization.
Okay, so you drilled south, and looking, I've seen a couple of your maps, and it looks as if these bodies do run east-west, and so he effectively drilled parallel to strike.
Correct. Yes.
And what is the geology? I mean, are these? Tell me about the geology.
Okay, so certainly the geology is this is a layered mafic ultramafic intrusion. So it's a magmatic nickel copper sulfide mineralization within it. The Andover intrusion itself is quite large. It's probably about 20 kilometers by 10 kilometers in superficial outcropping area, and it's made up of multiple intrusions that have gone into to make up that same body. The mineralization itself is hosted in the very last intrusion that cross-cuts everything that went in earlier. So there's a couple of very large structures that cross-cut through this area, southwest to northeast orientated structures. And up one of those has come this very late stage gabbro. And this gabbro has it's a taxitic gabbro, so it contains clasts of other rocks that are in the area. So basement granites, some of the ultramafics and gabbros from the earlier part of the Andover intrusion. But what it's done is that it's scavenged all of the nickel it's scavenged a lot of nickel out of the surrounding ultramafic and has become fully sulfur saturated, and the nickel sulfides have dropped out at certain locations along this structure and the taxitic gabbro. And this we've done a very detailed geology over 4 kilometres of strike, and that taxitic gabbro has got outcropping gossans all the way along it. Not one single body, but multiple examples of outcropping gossans.
When you talk about the scavenging of the nickel into this taxitic gabbro, is there kind of sulfide immiscibility that creates the concentration of the sulfides, or is it something different to that? It's not a kind of a partial. It's not fractionation within the melt.
No, it's not a fractionation thing. It's not a typical layered intrusion where the sulfides have settled out by gravity separation. No, what's happened here is that the sulfide mineralization accumulates in areas where there's a slight structural complexity. For example, the taxitic gabbro may bend, it may change direction, and on the corner of those where it actually bends around, you get a preferential deposition of the nickel sulfides. Or alternatively, it could be a cross-cutting structure or fault zone, and we get the nickel sulfides dropping out there as well. So along the straight and narrow, there's some occurrences, but when there's some complexity, that triggers the settling out or the dropping out of the nickel sulfides. So
it's not a change necessarily in the chemistry, or it could be in the chemistry. It's a pressure change. Your sulfides will precipitate because of either temperature, pressure, or chemistry. And in this case, it seems to be that pressure is the pressure change is the most likely catalyst. So
it typically where this taxitic gabbro and the corridor in which it's travelling changes direction. Now, immediately into the footwall of the Andover deposit, there is a granite, and that granite is actually older basement. And so when that taxitic gabbro comes up to and comes into contact with the granite, it changes direction and it wraps around this granite batholith. And it's as it changes direction going around the granite that the nickel has settled out actually at the change of direction.
Okay. Could you pull up a map so I can get into my head the kind of the scale between what you've drilled out at Andover and where you can see the 4 kilometers of the taxitic gabbro? Have you got some kind of map that shows that?
So this is a very schematic geological plan of the Andover project area, which is made up of 3 exploration licenses that are outlined in blue, and they total about 108 square kilometres within the project area. And you can see on the bottom left-hand side in the southwest corner, there's a small granite, and wrapping around the northern side of it is a dark green rock unit. That dark green rock unit is the taxitic gabbro, which has come up along a corridor, and it has deposited the sulfide mineralisation at various locations. So the Andover deposit is located on the northeast corner of the granite, and the Ridgeline deposit is been deposited along the northern boundary of that granite. Mm-hmm. So that taxitic gabbro is part of what we call the southern mineralised corridor. From the Ridgeline deposit up through those other prospects to Skyline and Seaview, that's about 4 kilometres long. And we've done a great deal of very intense geological mapping, sampling, and geophysics, mostly EM survey, surface EM surveying there. And we've got a lot of outcropping gossans. You can crack fresh rock and you can find copper sulfide mineralisation within those fresh rocks. And then as it goes from Seaview further to the northeast, it seems to open right out. Now, the same taxitic gabbro continues for at least another 6 to 8 kilometres further to the northeast. So the entire mineralised corridor is likely to be sort of 10 to 12 kilometres long.
So that's the dotted green line kind of opening up as a funnel. That's the kind of the
Correct.
inferred mineralised corridor.
So we've got targets like we've called them either names in the bottom in the sort of the southwest quadrant, or VTEM conductor anomalies, VC 24, 31, 32, and the like. And most of those are in that mineralized corridor, if you like. And all of those are coincident gossans outcropping, sitting over the top of basement-hosted VTEM anomalies.
Okay, really interesting. I can see that you've got those lithium pegmatites in the red there, but let's save that for another section. Just sticking.
If I might just jump in on one thing that's really not a great, doesn't have a great deal to do with the prospectivity of the project area, but out of interest's sake, we decided we would age date the mineralisation at Andover. And so we took the sulfide mineralisation and the rocks hosting the sulfides, and we had it age dated at the Curtin University here in Western Australia. And they've come back using two different techniques, and they've come back with an age date for the mineralising event at Andover of 3.016 billion years. So 160 million. Yeah, 3 billion and 16 million years. So it's over 3 billion years old, the mineralisation, and that makes it the oldest known magmatic nickel sulfide deposit in the world.
Well, 3 billion years old. I mean, it's just totally incredible, and that's very much why I love geology. Talking, I mean, you say that it's been sitting there, kind of intact and underformed, just waiting to be discovered. Have you done any petrographic studies? Have you done any metallurgical work? What does it look like? What's the grain size? What are the minerals? Okay, well, the minerals are the nickel sulfide is pentlandite, which is also cobaltiferous. So there's cobalt within the pentlandite. The copper mineralisation is chalcopyrite, and the only other sulfide we see in there is pyrrhotite. So those are the three sulfide minerals. We have done a fair amount of metallurgical test work on it. We've done a lot of work on the Andover deposit, and we've done some preliminary work on the Ridgeline deposit. What we're looking at here is a standard crushing, grinding, flotation process, filtration to produce two different concentrates. One would be a nickel-cobalt concentrate, and the other one would be a copper concentrate. We're looking at, in terms of the nickel, we're getting about 80% recovery of the nickel and the cobalt into the concentrate. The nickel grade would be around about 13 to 14% in the con, and the cobalt grade in the concentrate will also be about 1%. So that's the nickel cobalt con. With the copper con, it's much the same. We get about a 77% recovery into a concentrate that's running over 25% copper, and that they separate out really nicely between those two elements. And we don't see, there's no nasties in it, no deleterious elements, a very low MgO. There's no arsenic, no other of the nasty elements that you sometimes get. So it's a very clean rock, and it treats really well, and it produces two great concentrates. Grain size, I mean, how what's that? It varies. Some of it's quite coarse grain, but that's probably because there's been a little bit of recrystallization or maybe remobilization into fractures and veinlets that are running across it. But most of it is quite fine grain. So we're looking at, in terms of the grind size, we're looking at around about 80 micron for the grind size to get the best recovery. Yeah, because those recoveries are good, but they're not kind of completely stellar. They're not. No. Yeah, that's right. And sorry, is that a function of grain size? The main challenge. There is. If you get the finer grain size you go, obviously we're going to get better recoveries, because there are some very fine grained sulfide parts of the body, or mostly because in the disseminated section. So best recoveries, probably as you'd expect, are in the massive and semi-massive sulfide zones. When you go out into the surrounding disseminated mineralisation, then there are parts of that which is quite fine grained, and that's where we lose a bit of recovery. Thank you. Now, when we were looking at the map, you showed me that there was the Andover and Ridgeline, and then the kind of the funnel up to the north east. Yeah. How much drilling has been done on that first kind of 2 or 3, 4 kilometers within the Texitic Gabbro areas? Yeah, very little. Just a little bit of background, I suppose. We drilled just over 100 diamond holes into the Andover deposit. We drilled about 60 drill holes into the Ridgeline deposit, and we've drilled a total of 190 so far. So there's about 30 holes that are outside of those two deposits. And for example, we've drilled holes into what's Skyline and Seaview, which are in all probability the one and the same body of mineralisation.
And we've also drilled some holes into what we call Pipeline, which is up in the far northwest of the property area. And it's not, that one's not in that mineralized corridor. It's completely separate. It happened to be a coincident, some surface geology or sampling of the surface geology gave us some elevated PGEs and nickel. So we went up and did a survey up there, EM survey, and got a very nice response. We've drilled some holes there. We've yet to go public with what's we've seen in that drilling. But most of the holes we've drilled recent times have been at the Seaview and Skyline prospects.
And what have you disclosed about those two prospects? Have you seen similar style geology, similar style width, similar style mineralization and depth?
Yeah, when we drilled the first program at Seaview, which was probably a year ago now, maybe a bit more than a year, we did announce that the first results from the first 12 holes that we put into there, and we got some good encouragement and mineralization starting within 10 to 20 meters below surface. Sulfides going down to maybe 100 meters. Seems to be fairly flat dipping. Geologically, it's in a different situation than what we saw at Andover and Ridgeline, which are both steeply dipping and steeply plunging bodies. The Seaview one seems to be much more flat lying. I think the best of the intersections we got there was sort of 5 to 6 meters at around about 2% nickel, and we've followed it up. We've done quite a few more holes there now, probably about another dozen, and we've yet to go public with that information, but that's not too far away.
Okay, good. Tell me a bit about the resource that you put together at Andover, in terms of how advanced it is and where that how it manifests itself in section. Okay,
certainly. Would you like to have a look at a cross section?
Yeah, please. Yeah, let's do that.
There we go. So this is the section here. So this is actually a long section. We're looking towards the north. Red is the indicated resource category. Yellow or orange is the inferred category. There's about 4.6 million tons in the total resource, running at about 1.1% nickel plus 0.5% copper, a bit of cobalt as well. So around about 75,000 tons of total combined contained metal within the Andover deposit. It outcrops as a gossan, and quite a large gossan, as I said. It's probably up to a couple of 100 meters by 20 meters sticking out of the ground at surface. But the sulfides don't really come into it. They don't start until about 20 meters below surface. And then we just drilled over 100 holes into that. That's all diamond drilling. The drilling spacing is around about 20 meters by 20 meters. So we've got very good understanding of the continuity of grade and width. And that's why over 80% of this resource is in the indicated category. And we wanted to be able to have it in the indicated category so we can put it into a scoping study, apply economic parameters, and be able to publicly release information on the economic prospects for the deposit.
Is it
so the mineralization?
Sorry. Is it hard rock? Is it very fractured? I mean,
not fractured at all. It is. There are no fractures in it. There's only one. There's a fault that runs from sort of upper right hand side to lower left, which offsets it by about 5 to 10 meters. But apart from that, the rock is it's rock solid. It is very, very competent rock. The diamond drilling is swift. When we're diamond drilling in this area, we're drilling 50 to 60 meters in a 12-hour shift. Sometimes we got up to 100 meters in a 12-hour shift. The two holes that Mark Creasy drilled back in 2018, they were RC holes. They were drilling about 10 meters a day. The RC drilling just can't get through this hard rock, but the diamond drilling was cutting it like butter, and we were getting excellent productivity. The mineralization plunges towards the northwest. It is still open, albeit fairly weaker on the left-hand side of that section, and also on the right-hand side. But at depth, it's still wide open to be taken deeper. We just stopped drilling because it was getting quite expensive to go down that deep.
And what are the thicknesses? What are the how thick is this?
The mineralization in the core of it, in the central part of the deposit, would be between 20 and 30 meters of true width. With the total mineralized envelope, and within that you're going to get high zones of massive sulfides, which might be 8 to 12 meters wide. And the massive sulfides are all running 2 to 4% nickel. Around that, where it gets thinner and it's disseminated, it's running sort of 0.5 to 1.5% nickel. But the continuity between the drill holes of both the width and the grade is excellent.
So conventional mining,
underground. It'll be an underground mining operation.
And you won't even start with an open pit. You won't. No. You'll just go straight.
Unlikely, because if we went down as an open pit, we'd have to put a crown pillar underneath it, and that would sterilise some of the sulfide mineralisation nearer the surface. So with an underground mining operation, we will be able to take this to within 20 to 30 metres of surface.
How close is Ridgeline to a resource? And it looks much skinnier than Andover. So is it going to be kind of an incremental addition to it?
Yeah, it will be an incremental addition. They are two separate deposits located about 200 metres apart, but they exist within the same taxitic gabbro horizon. It's just in between the two deposits. The host rock's there, but the sulfides are not. So Ridgeline itself is probably about 350 metres long in an east-west direction. It starts at 200 metres below surface. It's the only occurrence of nickel at Andover that we've identified that doesn't come to surface. We found it through doing the downhole and the surface EM surveying that we did around the Andover deposit, pointed something out to the west, and we went out and drilled it, and we hit it there. So the mineralisation at Ridgeline is, as I said, it's about 350 metres long, but most of that is zones of sort of 5 to 10 metres wide, running maybe up to 1% nickel in disseminated sulfides. But within it, there's 3 chutes which are a focus for the sulfide deposition, and those sulfides have preferentially been deposited inside those chutes, and those chutes stretch from probably maybe 150 to 200 metres below surface down to 500 metres below surface. They're maybe up 70 to 80 metres in an east-west direction. They're up to 40 metres in thickness in places, and so the announcements that we put out, for example, today, demonstrated that we've got 30 odd metres and 27 metres of 1.5% nickel out of the central part of those chutes. So I don't expect Ridgeline to be equal to Andover in terms of the contained metal or the size, but it will be an incremental increase, and particularly attractive is that it will come in at a higher grade than Andover does.
So you've effectively got 3 pencil-like structures. Offset by a couple of 100 meters that you can drift across from once you're in underground development. You can schedule the mining so you can kind of blend your grade. You can make sure that you've got different headings going. Do you see any value in getting a directional? I'm doing some kind of a mother hole and drilling out with some wedges the deeper sections of Andover.
Yes, and that's something that we're actually planning right now. And under the West Australian Department of Mines, there's what they call an exploration incentive scheme, this EIS, where you make an application to do something a little bit different, and it usually involves drilling of a target that has not been tested before. So we put in an application to drill a very deep diamond drill hole. We're talking down to maybe 1,500 metres below surface, and the government has awarded us a grant where they will cover 50% of the cost of drilling that hole. So having received that grant, we'll actually be doing a very deep hole down there next year, probably, as I said, down to about 1,500 metres, and that'll be the mother hole. And yes, if we have some success in terms of downhole geophysics, identifying conductors, or if we actually hit some more mineralisation, we'll be doing daughter holes off that, wedging off that main hole.
So a 1,500 metre hole below 500 metres of depth. What does that step down by? I mean, that's a hell of a...
It's a long way down. So we're talking, it's from surface to the bottom of the Andover resource is 550 metres. We're talking about drilling, potentially, we haven't finalised this yet, but potentially we'll drill a hole sub-parallel to the deposit. Rather than trying to drill inside the deposit, we'll drill parallel to it. And then use the downhole EM to guide us for the daughter holes that come off it. Okay,
wow. So that's work in progress for 2023.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the nickel. You've got some lithium stuff. Can you? We haven't got a lot of time to do it, but can you just kind of summarise where you've got to on the lithium exploration?
Yes, certainly. Obviously, we've been exploring and focused on very much on the nickel story for the last 2 years. But probably 12 months ago, when the lithium phase really started to take off, and particularly a lot of companies were identifying lithium in pegmatites, I asked our geological team if there were any pegmatites out there. And at the beginning of 2022, they went out and did some regional mapping and sampling, and they identified quite a few pegmatites outcropping at surface. And so for about the last 6 months, there's been an intense program of mapping and sampling across the Andover project, across the entire project area. And through that's involved both remote sensing work and also boots on the ground exploration as well. So from the remote sensing, which is aerial photography and radiometrics, we identified over 500 potential outcrops of pegmatites. And the geologists have been out there on the ground. They've looked at and confirmed that over 130 of these outcrops of potential pegmatites are in fact outcropping pegmatites. And there's been a lot of sampling being done, and we released some information, some results about that last week. And we've been getting some of the zones which we've sampled have been quite rich in spodumene, and we've been getting lithium grades up to over 3.3%, 2.6%, lots in the 1% range. So this is lithium oxide. And we've obviously identified something here that is potentially could add a significant new valuable string to the bow of the Andover project. And so we've formed two teams, and we've got a nickel team, nickel focused team, and a lithium focused team. And the lithium focused team have been on the ground, as I said, for the last 6 months. There's some really good looking targets out there. So we just need to fine tune those with more surface work, and then we'll be in there drilling in the first quarter of next year.
Okay. It's great fun when you're doing this kind of exploration, which is remote sensing and prospecting and ground truthing, mapping and sampling, because it's a very low cost way of creating value. But now you've got the lie detectors or the truth machines, the rotary truth machine about to move in.
That's it. Yeah, that's probably going to be in the first quarter of next year. This is an area, the Andover project area is situated in the Pilbara region, the West Pilbara, and it's not far away from where Rio Tinto had their issue with the caves. And so it's the same traditional owners in our area as it was down around Rio Tinto's iron ore operations. So we need to be very aware and cognizant of doing everything by the book and doing it properly. So we've over the last 2 years, we've endeavoured to build really strong relationships, and we've succeeded in building really strong relationships with the local traditional owners. And we have in place a heritage protection agreement with the Ngarluma people, who are the traditional owners, and that gives us the rights and the opportunities to go out and do exploration. But before we can do anything that disturbs the surface, we have to run heritage clearance surveys over the areas where we want to go and build a road or drill a hole and the like. And so far, we've done about 6 of these surveys, and the cooperation from the traditional owners has been fantastic. And if they come across an area where they say, look, this is a bit sensitive for us, or it's important that you don't disturb it, it gets flagged off. We don't go into those areas, and we operate in the other areas. So most of the project area is available for us to do our work on. Where a lot of the pegmatites outcrop are areas where we've not had the heritage surveys done so far. So that'll be happening over the next few months. And then let's fingers crossed that we don't have any sacred sites being identified near those pegmatites, and we can go in there and drill in the first quarter of next year.
Well, let's wrap up with your kind of the news flow over the next 9 months or so, 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, obviously the nickel is still very much the focus. So we're still diamond drilling the nickel-copper-cobalt sulfide targets that we've got. We've got targets which have been generated through the mapping and sampling and identifying gossans. We've got the geophysical targets. We've got a lot of targets ahead of us that need drill testing. And so that nickel exploration program will be ongoing it'll be ongoing for as far as we can see, and probably drilling for the next 12 months as well.
And what, one rig or 2 rigs?
Just the 1 rig at the moment. We had 3 diamond rigs working there when we were doing the resource drill out. But when we've pivoted back to just doing exploration drilling on the specific targets, we just want one rig because we don't want to,
Put in the wrong place.
We've got.
Yeah, and you can drill quite quickly. Does the assay turnaround keep up with the drilling?
No, it doesn't, unfortunately. The assay turnaround time at the moment is sort of absolute bare minimum would be 6 weeks, but more likely 8 to 10 weeks to get our assays back. However, we are drilling for nickel and copper sulfide mineralization, which is visible in the drill core. So our geologists are experienced enough, and obviously we've been working here for 2 years. We know what the sulfides look like in this part of the world, so we can actually have a pretty good guess, if you like, or an understanding of what the grades are likely to run. Plus, we've got the portable XRFs that we can use, which will give us spot readings and to confirm it. But the not having the assays does slow us down, or at least it means that we can't follow up targets immediately. We've got to actually do a bit of ground truthing and then wait for the assays.
But you've got the taxitic gabbro, so you've got a very clear geology marker, geological marker, and then you've got the metal marker in the form of the sulfides. Absolutely,
that taxitic gabbro is very, very visible. It's completely different from the rocks around it, whether it's other gabbros or whether it's ultramafics. It's very visible at surface. It contains all of the gossans that we've identified so far. So yeah, that's very much the focus of our work.
Good. So essentially, it's exploration results. What about the de-risking? Where are you going to be in the study phase during the course of 2023?
Okay. So when we were drilling at Andover in the early days, we're talking probably 18 months to a year ago from now, we recognised that there was a good potential for this to actually be developed into an operating nickel mine. So we commenced our development studies probably 18 months ago now, and we have been carrying out all of the components of a scoping study over that period. So we've got metallurgy, mine planning, geotechnical work, tailings storage, mineral processing design. All of those components have been either completed or are very close to being completed. And then we'll have all of those being combined into a scoping study, which we hope to be in a position to release publicly probably towards the end of the first quarter of next year. So we'll get the scoping study out, and let's assume, and given that it has a successful outcome, then we'll be just pushing straight forward into doing either PFS or straight into a definitive feasibility.
I like the story of, was it Sandfire who got the DeGrussa deposit from discovery to production in about 5 years? And I see that you got a 5-year plan for Andover.
Well, it would be nice 5 years. The Cosmos mine at Jubilee that we had at Jubilee, we got it into production in 3 years. But that was in the 1990s, and things were a little different back then.
Yeah, and you're not operating in the Northwest Pilbara and the heritage areas, perhaps.
Yeah, that's part of it. So yes, the heritage, the community, the environmental, all of those studies are all ongoing at the moment, and they're just as key to a successful project as the technical aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tony, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Congratulations on the geological success. It's slightly frustrating that it's another Creasy success. It's like, damn it.
Yeah, the guy is good.
Yeah, he's good. But congratulations to you, and I look forward to seeing the progress as the news stories come through.
Appreciate it. Thanks for that time, Merlin. It's been a good time. Good interview.